Well, thank you, Kelly. It's great to be here. Thank you, Informa. Really appreciate this opportunity. I'm Jonathan Grabel, the Chief Investment Officer for the Los Angeles County Employees Retirement Association. And we'll start with a polling question, if that can be put up for the audience. And the polling question is, when will we go back to in-person diligence meetings? 2021, 2022, 2023, or in-person due diligence will rarely be necessary in the future as a result of technology. And with that, we'll see what the audience thinks towards the end of the presentation. So in addition to these topics, once again, we'll have a polling question and see what the answers are at the end. So LACERA, our mission is to produce, protect, and provide promised benefits to our members. And this is something that we never lose sight of. For us, investments are a mechanism to meet this mission. As the slide shows, we work for over 184,000 active and retired members in Los Angeles County. We also oversee a healthcare trust. On the right side, it shows that the pension balance was $65 billion at the end of 2020. The graphic on the bottom is a very important one. It shows our balancing act. And similar to other public pensions, we have a tough balancing act. We need the most conservative asset allocation, or assets, which is cash, to pay benefits today. And at the same time, we need the most aggressive assets to pay benefits to a person starting today and retiring well into the future. As a mature pension with benefit payments greater than contributions, this is a difficult balancing act. And how we apportion our assets, or through a strategic asset allocation, is how we position ourselves for success. It's clear that we're in a low interest rate environment that challenges us to challenge conventions, be flexible and nimble. In this context, LACERA has crafted a strategic plan that we've titled Allocator to Investor. It's predicated on moving from being passive to being active and engaged. This graphic shows that we use both our left and right brain, as Allocator to Investor is both science and art. I'll go a bit around the chart here in that we focus on investment structures. For example, in private credit, we structure evergreen mandates such that our capital continually is deployed and working for us. We construct a diversified portfolio. We're wary of over-diversification at the sub-portfolio level. For example, we don't need equity-like fixed income. We focus more on diversification at the total fund level. And towards this end, we've created functional asset categories where we've grouped assets with like risks together. Our internal culture on the upper right, we're no longer in silos. We work across asset categories in that functional frameworks. And for example, team members have led investments in other asset categories. The themes on the bottom right include the appropriate investment model, whether we do something internally or externally, cost of capitals, fees, liquidity versus long-locked vehicles, and importantly, responsible stewardship through engagement. Allocator to Investor includes recognizing and acting on macro themes. Technology is a key theme. We view it both as an investment opportunity and as an approach to investments. This slide has some pretty heady facts about technology valuations, spending, and workforce composition. It's clear from this slide that technology has become an essential need and force. It's more than innovation. It's a way to connect, educate, and as the middle shows, clearly a way to order pizza. And it is more relevant than ever during a pandemic. For LACERA, technology is critical to identifying, diligencing, making, and monitoring investments. It helps us communicate with our board, key stakeholders, partners, and it is a fertile area for our investment portfolio. Turning to the next slide, Allocator to Investor also highlights intentionality. All else equal, we choose the lowest cost, most liquid, least levered, version of any given investment. There's no need to take unnecessary risks. This chart highlights the importance of portfolio construction. We group all forms of equity together in our growth portfolio, which has a target of about 50%. And this goes back to the functional framework that I mentioned on a prior slide. Public equity is the largest component of this portfolio because it has the best liquidity and lowest cost of ownership, as well as key shareholder rights. To the extent we cannot identify a public market opportunity, and here's an example, maybe with a bit of alliteration, say fintech in Finland, we're willing to embrace illiquidity, lesser governance rights, and/or leverage. However, we expect to be compensated for these risks. And this is true not just in private equity, but across the portfolio. And it's consistent with implementation and the mindset associated and articulated in our strategic plan. Put another way, we do not make venture capital investments just because something has a venture label. We ask deeper questions. We ask why. We evaluate alternatives, both within a sleeve, for example, within our growth sleeve, or we would look across the portfolio to see if it makes sense in another asset category. We look to manage risks, and once again, we look to be as intentional as possible. This is an example of the prior slide with our technology exposure. This shows technology across our growth portfolio, and that's highlighted within the red box. The slide shows that we're target weight in public markets. And that makes sense as most of our portfolio is indexed and/or factored. We are, however, overweight technology in private equity. And that's because there are many compelling opportunities. For example, it's harder to access technology in certain emerging public market spaces. Many emerging markets, for example, their public markets are overweight to financials and energy. So to the extent we have a macro theme for technology, we need to look to private markets. As a result of this mindset, our returns have benefited from this technology overweight that's shown on the slide of being about 4% overweight to what the benchmark is. As we evaluate new investments, we look at the prudence of potentially increasing or decreasing that 4% overweight that's on the slide. One of the ways we've done that is through a new comprehensive risk system that allows us to build pro forma analysis, better test suitability, and importantly, scenario test the portfolio. Turning to the next slide, it's clear and maybe an understatement to say that this past year has been different. And given that today is February 2nd, the whole year has probably been Groundhog's Day. And COVID has created challenges. We've been physically separated. At LACERA, we've been fortunate to be able to compensate for this separation through technology. Our knowledge management systems and video chat have certainly helped us, it's helped us also increase communication with our board, and that's labeled on the challenge column in the top of the chart. Diligence has had to change, and that's in the middle of the page, given that we're no longer traveling, at least for the time being, and that goes back to the polling question. But to compensate for that and how we've evolved, we've had shorter, more frequent virtual meetings. We've had greater access to prospective partners, and we've probed middle and back office functions, and that's key to risk management. On the bottom of the slide, we highlight the challenge of that monitoring an investment has changed, given greater uncertainties about portfolio companies and manager prospects. One of the things that we've done to address this is we've developed a 5-factor manager scorecard. Now, this existed prior to the pandemic, but we expanded it to private markets during the pandemic. And that scorecard is a measure of qualitative and quantitative aspects across all asset categories for all managers. We also have improved our performance reporting systems that allow us to aggregate more granular data. We've been more resilient and adaptable during the pandemic. It's been a requirement, and this is all to improve our mission to our members. Now, this slide can be an entire conference in and of itself. We're clearly in a low expected return environment as a result of historically low interest rates. That's forced us to move beyond a two-dimensional worldview of solely looking at financial metrics. we must embrace a three-dimensional analysis that evaluates other types of risks, embraces other factors that drive outcomes, and align our organization with a dynamic mindset. Starting on the left, LACERA believes that evaluating E, S, and G risk factors that we position our portfolio for long-term value creation. It's part of every investment recommendation and part of the scorecard I just mentioned. Investment due diligence is necessary but not sufficient. We must couple it with operational due diligence, and that's a key risk mitigant. We have to think about cyber, business continuity, custody, valuation, and compliance. And on the right side, to enhance returns and minimize risks, we value diverse, equitable, and inclusive teams. This belief is clearly stated in our investment policy statement. Our long-standing commitment has been grouped into 5 pillars that are on this slide, and it's given the name TIDE, which shows that it's a continuous process. Our use of technology has positioned us to optimize risk-adjusted performance for the LACERA fund. The next couple of slides focus on this process. Specifically, we've widened the funnel of opportunity to seek the best quality returns in this low return environment. I've mentioned some of these points in the prior slides. First, we're meeting with more firms, and there's been greater involvement from our entire team. There's no longer just one person going to visit, and it's less orchestrated by a firm's marketing team. Our analysis looks at portfolio construction and evaluates portfolio context. Going down the chart, ODD is critical. Imagine had we failed to look at business continuity over the past year. And we're creating best practices for virtual visits. We're standardizing questions, looking at the number of participants, length of time, and the title of those participants. All of this, as the bottom of the chart shows, has resulted in new relationships that we believe will inure to the benefit of the fund and our members. We're widening the funnel through our emerging manager program, as this slide is dedicated to. Private equity emerging manager program is managed by JP Morgan. We have clear business rules and objectives for that program. All the relationships in the program are in our name and are done through a separate account. This allows us to better foster graduation. It helps us build a mutually beneficial partnership, and that includes advancing best practices and promoting our investment beliefs, including ESG and diversity, equity, and inclusion. We believe that emerging managers may be more nimble and additive to the return expectations for LACERA. Small capital bases can extract returns from differentiated areas that may be immaterial to larger firms, but important for us. And emerging managers help craft long-term partnerships. And those partnerships include future capacity rights and scalable terms. We'll likely be in the market for the next tranche of our private equity emerging manager program later this year. So for all those on the phone that are interested, go to LACERA.com and stay tuned for an RFP for the next tranche of our emerging manager program. We're also widening the funnel through our co-investment and secondaries program, and this is part of our strategic plan. We look to build an intentional portfolio, incur lower costs, and do it internally where possible. One of the reasons we do this is to build somewhat of a esprit de corps within our investment organization. Part of that is it helps us do better diligence, a better understanding of current partners, and a better way to evaluate prospective ones. Our co-investment program, as the slide shows, and secondary program is global and is focused at various stages of the PE lifecycle, from buyout to venture. We've made technology-related investments in this program, and we're using technology in our underwriting. The returns thus far for this program have been quite promising, and it's part of widening our funnel. And before we see the poll and take some questions if there's time, I'll conclude by saying that LACERA views all investments from a total fund perspective. This includes portfolio-wide initiatives such as ESG and diversity, equity, inclusion. This is part of our strategic plan. Yet we need to push for greater goal alignment and focus on improving governance at the GP level. Technology is a key macro theme and portfolio driver. Yet we're also dependent on technology to do our job. We believe that technology has disrupted business, and many aspects of these changes are likely permanent. One way technology has disrupted business that has helped widen our evaluation funnel. Diligence is different. We're no longer dependent on a marketing person visiting Los Angeles. There are lower barriers to a meeting, which are facilitated by digital tools. We believe this helps emerging firms better compete for capital. It allows us to increase portfolio specificity with our co-investments and secondaries. This helps returns and is in the best interest of our members. So I want to thank everyone for their time, and I have the answers to the polling question, which was, when will we go back to in-person diligence meetings? And let's see, 17% said this year, 2021. The vast majority, almost a super majority, said 2022, which is 61%, none in 2023, and 22%, which is the second largest number, think that it's been disrupted forever as a result of technology. And I don't know, Kelly, if there are any questions, if we have time for questions, but I appreciate everyone's time.
I've got a follow-up question related to the poll results, and wanted to ask your opinion about some of this. The 22% who said that rarely be necessary in the future. I guess in talking to limited partners as a placement agent, I think the first step, the marketing, visiting an LP with a pitch book, usually by a marketing person or maybe one member of the GP, that really has been almost totally replaced this year. But there are a number of people who are still focused, LPs who are still focused on, well, before I commit, I want to visit these people and make sure that there's a team there and not a group of people. I don't know what your perspective on that is.
No, and I appreciate the question, Kelly. I think that we've challenged the convention that maybe the import, or we've re-ranked things, that it all comes down to that final diligence meeting. And I think that meeting people is critical. There's certain visual cues you pick up on, you read body language, you see the dynamic of when the key person walks in the room and how that person empowers the more junior line ranks of a firm. I think that more diligence can be done virtually by more people on our team, and that's where we can take advantage of technology. Yet I think that there's a critical role for in-person meeting, especially just to, once again, pick up on visual cues, because private equity and investing in general is really easy till there are challenges. And understanding what motivates people and how they respond and react is something that you pick up through visual cues.
Great. Well, I think we've reached the end of our session here. Wanted to thank you, John, for a very interesting presentation.